Ahoy! Welcome to the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast with Phil Bender, where we help listeners navigate the uncharted waters of personal and professional growth. The Sea Captain Leadership Podcast is about sharing energizing stories of leadership development and the culture surrounding top-performing individuals and their businesses. We want to help you to take risks and build your vision by showing you how to break free of the boundaries that are holding you back. Today, we welcome Christian Boucousis, a former Australian fighter pilot who's turned his elite aviation mindset into a framework for high performance and leadership. Boo is now the CEO of Afterburner, and his journey is one of transformation from being diagnosed with ADHD, which I can appreciate, and a debilitating autoimmune disorder as a child, to becoming a human behavior specialist, strategist, and sought-after keynote speaker. He's proof that excellence isn't born, it's built. Boo, it's great to have you on with us today. We're excited to dive into your story and the lessons leaders can take from it. Welcome, Boucousis, to the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Phil. It's a real pleasure to be on the show. Looking forward to bringing some maritime, some leadership, some aviation. I'm pretty sure this conversation can go just about anywhere.
Yeah, and maybe straight into happy hour. You never know, but it's definitely
We're getting close.
We are getting close, and actually, just in our
it's 10 o'clock somewhere
in our pregame, you have an infectious way about you and your energy, and for those that don't yet know you, they soon will. Now, you've spoken openly about being neurodiverse, growing up with ADHD, something a lot of our listeners, as I said myself, can relate to. How did that shape you in a way to see the world and approach challenges?
Well, first of all, I didn't know until a few years ago when my son was going through high school and struggling academically, and they were concerned he had ADHD. So they said, "Look, really good school. They're like, part of the process is we like the parents to go and do an ADHD assessment." And I did one, and I was literally off the charts, 99.6, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that kind of explains a lot." So I think ADHD has many forms. Mine is really hyper focus, and very fortunate that when I was a young kid, 5 years of age, going to an air show, seeing all these incredible fighter jets. At the time, brand new F-18 Hornets had just come to Australia. I lived where I live. We used to have F-111s flying over kind of every day. I lived near a little airport, had little airplanes flying over all the time as well. So just where I lived was I was always in the backyard, just looking at airplanes. I had two uncles that were helicopter pilots, but really that 5-year-old boy, all the sounds, the jet fuel, the imagery, the fighter pilots in their flight suits, and I collected patches. I was a total nerd. That shaped me, and that gave me something to focus on, which a lot of people don't have. And I guess it kind of, where ADHD manifested itself was at school, because I wasn't very good at the academic side. And I repeated 12th grade. I did it twice and barely got a better mark the second time round, but I needed a B+ to get into the Air Force, and I pretty much got there, except anything to do with exercise or physicality. I was an A+, physical education student.
Yeah.
So anything that was fun, I was all in. And I also, I started to learn to fly when I was 14. My parents had a supermarket. I have a pretty epic work ethic. Like I work really hard. I just love work. And so I was working in a supermarket at 12, in a video store when I was 14. If you're listening to this, you don't know what a video store is. It was the thing that they had before Netflix. Right. And I did odd jobs, and every dollar I spent, I paid my own way. My parents didn't give me anything. And I went first solo in an airplane when I was 15. I got my private pilot's license when I was 16. And, just given how hard it is to become a fighter pilot, I was going to become a pilot and pay my own way through it. I went to college for 6 weeks. I dropped out. I hated it. And then I just worked 7 days a week, Monday to Friday. I was mowing lawns. and Wednesday to Sunday I was working in a bar. And all through that, I was running through the application process. So the first time I ran through the application process to be a fighter pilot, I went through the academy stream, and they're like, we think you want to be a pilot more than do the academy. I'm like, yeah, I am. Yeah, no, obviously. But if I have to do the academy, I'll do it. And they're like, no, apply next year and apply to be a direct entry pilot. And in Australia, we're fortunate that you can be an officer in the military and not have a college degree. You don't have to go through ROTC. You don't have to go through an academy. You can literally be 18, join, do officer training, and you're an officer. The second time round, I did that. And whilst my academics weren't very good, the universe has a bigger plan. God has a bigger plan for all of us, right? And it just so happened that when I got through all the selection processes, like one of the steps during the selection process, I was actually assessed as having short-sighted vision, which is a no-no. But I was so passionate and so engaged with the ophthalmologist that he just agreed to. He's like, "Look, I'm going to sign you up as if you have perfect vision. Right? But when you join, make sure you get a pair of glasses." And then when I did my officer selection board, the last step of the process, the senior ranking officer on that board just came with a different perspective, and he's like, "I think we need to recruit really young kids that we can mold." And myself and 3 other, at the time, 18-year-olds were selected, and we all made it to fighter jets. So he proved up, and to this day, he just remembers us, and he remembers me, and he goes, Boo, because I knew him. Obviously, I met him when I became a pilot, and I came across him lots of times, and every time I met him, he's like, "I'll always remember you because you were the kid that wanted it more than anyone else." And that to me is the secret to life and the secret to success and the secret to leadership is if you want something really bad, you've got to do a ton of hard work to get there. And what's really great about the Air Force, particularly with someone like, and I think most fighter pilots have ADHD, to be honest, is it just gives you a dopamine pathway. Every day you've got a mission. Or during the training process, you fly about 400 training missions, $15 million. And every one of them's a little bit harder than the one before. So it kind of galvanizes your brain. But the ADHD stuff, like now at the age of 50, when I look back on it, I look at the world today, the whole world has ADHD thanks to technology. It's just that I've had it my whole life, so I kind of know what you need to do to not let technology and distraction kind of erode your leadership game. Because a lot of leaders are incredibly distracted and as a result are quite ineffective.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It's funny. I had a follow-up question about adversity, but the reality is I don't need to ask it because you just plowed through all of it. Based on what you've said so far. Now I know darn well that there were moments when adversity was in your way. Um, Maybe touch on just a couple of where you had to work your way through at that young stage. Any come to mind?
Every day, like every day
Yeah,
was tough for me. Every day trying to pay attention in class. The second time I went through 12th grade, you know, uh, as a kind of an athlete, you always looked at the after school support as like that's what the nerds did, that's what the stupid kids did. So the first time around, my ego was in the way.
yeah, sure.
But the second time round, I went to them, right? So I did school, and then every day I did an extra hour, like with just one-on-one with the teacher. So I knew that I needed to get the right marks to get through. And the problem with ADHD is even in an exam environment, you just answer questions wrong because you're just not focused enough on a question. And you'd get the results and you go, it's just full of stupid mistakes. You're not stupid, but you're just not a details person,
Right.
right? So for me, even an exam, just everything about it, like being a pilot, every day is adversity. The first time you go solo in an airplane, you're like, damn, I got to get this thing back down, and there's no one to help me. My instructor's gone. Being every mission you fly is incrementally harder than the mission before. It's just that you've skilled yourself up a little bit. So relatively speaking, it's just as hard as the day before, but quantitatively, it's getting from having no idea how to fly an airplane to being a fully trained fighter pilot is a long journey. So learning to be a fighter pilot, you have to learn almost 220 checklist items from 1 to 220, and you've got to know every one of them by rote. And that's hard, right? So every single thing is hard. Nothing is easy. Even when you're a qualified fighter pilot, even after doing it for 11 years, I still walk up to the damn airplane and I'm still nervous. It's hard. It's so much to remember. The environment is so complicated and three-dimensional and fast and overwhelming that the model that we have, both cognitively and the way we work, is fit for purpose for today's world. I call it the digital vortex, the speed, overwhelm, and the battle of attention. And that's the three problems that being a fighter pilot has to solve.
Yeah, speed, overwhelm, and battle of attention. That's probably worth the podcast by itself today. It's so interesting as you're sharing with me is life or death scenarios. Being raised with attention deficit. I had moments in my life where I was very focused, laser focused, like write a book in 3 months type focus kind of stuff. Okay. And then I've had times in my life where I was completely distracted. And college was, for me, my undergraduate experience was like that. Um, for me, life and death experiences, like you said, I got 220 things to do or it ain't happening. um, Putting yourself into those situations really enhances the performance of somebody with ADHD. Um, and I was one of those people. Deadlines, putting situations where I made money. I knew if I had to make money, I would do that. So I think that's interesting. The other piece that we definitely connect on is, there are work to live people and there are live to work people, and I am one of those live to work people. It's just a major part. So a lot of connection there. So now we go from fighter pilot to CEO. Okay, big pivot. Okay, and from the precision and discipline of being a fighter pilot to the complexity of running a business and advising global leaders, what was that transition like for you? Was there a moment where you realized the same principles, as you mentioned, that make great pilots could transform an organization that operates on the ground? I mean, what was that transformation like?
I mean, I didn't know it until I came across this company, Afterburner, 10 years ago in Australia. A friend of mine owned a license, and Afterburner it's the original organization that brought the fighter pilot way into business 30 years
Mhm.
ago. And they operate on a license basis. And I went to a keynote where they were delivering. I thought it was a bit cheesy. I thought, what the on earth could you learn from a fighter pilot? And then I watched this presentation, and my brain exploded in the synergies, and I just saw my whole life backwards, particularly the transition from being in the military to being in business, as to how useful it was. So starting a business is hard. So tick, did that. I've just done 11 years of hard, so that's not a
Yeah.
problem. But really, what you learn as a fighter pilot is really a heightened sense of critical thinking and problem solving, where every mission we have a debrief ritual, and we say debriefing is more important than the mission itself, to find time to reflect with intention.
Mhm.
And that becomes a way of thinking. That just becomes who you are. And the way that you are is you say, what does good look like? Where am I now? Why is there a gap? And what do I do about it in the next 24
Right.
hours? So I had to. So my diagnosis with my autoimmune disorder, it wasn't as a child. It was when I was 30, and it was what resulted in me being medically discharged from the
I
Air Force
see.
and being
Okay.
forced
Right.
to make another decision. So to me, I didn't want to be an airline pilot. They offered me a job as a VIP pilot in the Air Force, and I didn't want to fly politicians around. And I just felt that being an airline pilot, from 30 to 65, your whole life's mapped out, and that's not a great ADHD trait. That's not a good trait for an ADHD person. So I just thought, well, I'll go into business. My dad was in sales, and so I'd been around that a long time. And I had a look at the landscape, and I'm like, well, if I go into business in Australia, I don't know what I'm doing. There's a lot of people with really strong relationships. I knew relationships were important. I had none. and it's going to be like extra hard. So my best mate and I went, well, maybe if we go to Iraq or Afghanistan, having just spent the last few years there knocking the place down, we know they're rebuilding. So maybe there's opportunities there for guys like us that have no skills. So that's what we did. We just moved to Afghanistan and set up a company that started in security, but it became the go-to for humanitarian project implementation. And it grew really fast, and it was super successful. We nearly had 6,000 staff. It was great. But it doesn't matter whether it's business, whether you're a founder, whether you're in an existing business. The people who thrive are the ones that are curious and intentional, and not just intentional in thought, intentional in action, because it's the action's the most important part. You can sit there and pontificate and analyze and come up with the best ideas on the planet, but it's not till they're executed and they arrive, they're actually implemented, that it becomes something worthwhile. And that's, so our business was really, we didn't have any products or services. We didn't have anything really, but we just were really good at having conversations with people and facilitating a debrief. We didn't know we were doing it that way. We were doing it unconsciously. And what that was doing was opening them up. We a lot of people in sales and business think you're problem solving. That's not what you do. Your job is to help people arrive at their aspiration.
That's right.
Yeah. And we always start conversations like that. We say, hey, what does good look like? How's it going? What are some of the challenges? What if we come back to you by the end of the week with a proposal to help you get there faster? And that's what Afterburner does. We don't do anything apart from help organizations, leaders, and individuals just get to where they want to get to faster with less effort.
Yeah, which is real coaching. I mean, by definition, that is what coaching is, and that is you assume the client knows the answer. They just can't get to the answer for one reason or another. They're not willing.
Yeah, they're just caught up in their own mind. They've got all of the baggage to date, all the things that didn't work, and with the negativity bias that we have, we typically just lose energy, right? And the problem with business is when things get hard, they just hire someone else, and when it gets too hard for that person, but really, you don't need to hire all those people. You just need to clear the decks. You just need to be way more intentional about aligning to a destination, coming up with a plan to get there, and then resourcing the plan to get there, rather than just resourcing everything and nothing getting there.
Yeah. So you've developed what you call the flawless leadership model, a framework that emphasizes speed, alignment, and adaptability. Uh, why do you think those three qualities are essential in today's leadership landscape? First question. What are the common mistakes leaders make as they try to build speed and adaptability in their organizations?
Yeah, so flawless. So I bought a company that created a process called flawless execution, which is effectively a way of working. And for me, when I saw the implementation of these processes, the biggest failure in them succeeding was the leadership. That the leaders didn't understand it. The leaders want everyone else to be really effective, but they don't want to do it themselves. And it's not that they don't want to do it intentionally. They just don't know how to do it. They don't know their role in execution because they're so far removed from that when they get to the point where they're the strategic decision makers. So last year, I started to reframe what we do from a leadership lens. And when we talk about flawless leadership, we talk about mindset, method, and moments, which is what I was taught as a fighter pilot. We have an intentional mindset. We have a very simple method to plan, brief, execute, and debrief missions. And we have different ways in which we lead. We have to lead in the moment. We have to make really great decisions second by second, which is really about personal awareness and execution. Then we have to lead missions, which is leading small teams of people. And then we have to be people leaders. We have to lead people. And most leaders put that into a big ball where if something goes wrong in the now, it becomes personal. It's a personal performance. But when you unpick it, you realize, well, that person didn't really know what good looked like, and you didn't train them, and they didn't understand what was involved in their job. So you got to fix that before you start blaming the individual. So we help them navigate those three levels of leadership, where people leadership is a tech-free zone. It's where you allow, and what you learn about ADHD is a lot. when you really dig deep on it, you start to understand how the brain works and how the neural pathways are engineered. And we have this element of the brain called the salient network. And the salient network is like a switch between the task positive network, the doing brain, and the default mode network, which is the thinking brain. And if you don't intentionally move that switch backwards and forwards, you just sit there all day and you just wear yourself out, right? You're not doing things very well and you're not thinking very well. And you get home and you're tired and you're frustrated and you've got nothing in the tank and your family's getting the worst version of yourself. So through the way fighter pilots work is they turn the task positive network on. So we're going on a mission, we missionize, and then we turn it off. We're not on a mission. So what I try and help leaders do is understand how to missionize your life, how to be on and then how to be off and nothing in between. And no one tells you how to do that. Like no one has that consequence of doing a bad job, which is death. So for the last, I would guess, 11 years, I basically have taken the fighter pilot model and tested it against everything else that exists. You know, I became a student of John Maxwell. He's a phenomenal leadership expert.
Right,
Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Carol Dweck and Mindset. You know, and looking at the leaders of their field in terms of the 5 Habits of Highly Effective People. Well, that's kind of execution. That's methodology. How to win friends and influence people. Well, that's kind of people leadership. And I've never found a system that brings it all together, that allows a leader to bring all of those books and all the greatness that's there, because there's no study on earth outside the Air Force where people die to prove whether it works or not. It's theory. It's every study is contaminated with the bias of the person running the study, right? Whereas the fighter pilot model is biased by saving people's lives and making sure the same number of airplanes that go out in a mission come back.
Yeah. It again, fascinating. And I love, again, you're mentioning all these different leaders and teachers of this behavior, but you're right. I have not really heard anybody say, can we put all of that together in a go-to-market strategy that
Well, you think
works.
of it in an Air Force, you think of a squadron commander as like a CEO. Well, you think of someone that runs every fighter jet, you know, in the US, that might be thousands of jets, tens of thousands of people. That individual still has to go and fly missions too. They still have to be an effective fighter pilot. A CEO doesn't go and there was only one company I've seen this. It was a company in Australia called Woolworths. It's our biggest supermarket chain, about 3,500 stores, 250,000 people. But that CEO used to make every executive go and work the checkout at least once a quarter to get to the coalface and see what it's actually like at execution. And that's why you get a really effective leadership model in the Air Force, is because the person making decisions at the people leadership layer is also working at the coalface with the pilots, with the maintainers, and understands implicitly what execution looks like. And when you build that system, the byproduct of that is an organization that sets a target and delivers it 99% of the time. You compare that to business, it's somewhere between 20 and 50%. So there's a lot of potential that hasn't been unlocked purely because there's been no imperative to build this system until now, where you are going to see hundreds of millions of people lose their job because they're doers, they're not thinkers.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go further here. Now let's talk about leadership. It doesn't just happen. Okay. It's a choice. That's a statement that you made to us. Um, I always act, or my statement that I always make is all the time is, if you're looking for the leader in the room and you can't find them, it's you, right? And I love your line about the 3 pivotal leadership scenarios that everyone faces at some point. Walk me through these 3 scenarios for our listeners, and what distinguishes high performing leaders in each of them.
So we call them dimensions because they're not 1, 2, 3. They interplay each other, right? So if you start with the dimension of mindset, okay. So mindset, if you look at, I guess, the research on mindset, they kind of bundle it into two: a fixed mindset, I am who I am, and a growth mindset, I can grow into someone I want to be, right? So when you talk about a fighter pilot mindset, you recruit a whole bunch of fixed mindset kids and you got to turn them into growth minded fighter pilots. And the way you do that is you bring action to intention. So we talk about intention, which is being, what do I want to be? You want to be a fighter pilot. And then we break intention down into missions. So what do I do every single day to become that intention? The second is understanding reality, like who you are now, and that you are ultimately the product of your biases and your beliefs and the way you behave, and that they're all linked up, right? So if you're biased towards a certain way, you'll believe a certain thing and you'll act a certain way. And then the third part of a fighter pilot mindset is curiosity, which is to ask yourself, is where I needed to be today and who I needed to be today, who I was? And if not, why not? And what do I need to do differently tomorrow? And that's the action part. So we frame mindset as intention plus action equals impact. And when we say the word impact, we're talking about the emotional byproduct of your decisions, right? Now, when we go into the second dimension, which is method, the method that we use actually creates that mindset. Plan, brief, execute, debrief. So planning is about defining your intention in a way that you can measure. Briefing is how you share that knowledge with the people around you, not to tell them what your intention is, but to make sure they understand and understand their role in being part of your journey, right? So when we talk about vision, mission, goals, and purpose, it doesn't mean anything if no one understands it. If it means something to you, the CEO, because you created it, it doesn't mean anything to anyone else. And that's incredibly underinvested in that part, which is, here's our strategy. We built it in a boardroom. We send it out in an email. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
And
right.
most people just put it
Exactly.
in the deleter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a big part, of the people leadership is, if you've got 200,000 people in your organization, have you built a system where every leader has had one-on-one FaceTime to confirm that individual's role and what they do and what they deliver in service to the overarching vision, mission, goals, and purpose?
Yeah.
So you've got to have a method that supports a mindset. You can't just have mindset without method. It doesn't work. You can be as intentional as you want. You can look in the mirror and say how amazing you are. You can have all the positive affirmations you want in the world, but at the end of the day, you're not going to become confident. You're not going to become courageous, and you're not going to become the person you want to be without the action piece. So the action piece now, when we talk about the method, is what we call execution. So we plan it, we brief it, and then we do it. We execute it, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about execution, that's where human performance starts to manifest itself. And really, there's only three things that affect execution. One, the way you did it, you didn't know, you were unfamiliar, like it's a personal execution problem. Two, you didn't understand, so the brief was wrong, or you didn't understand from the brief. Or three, the plan was crappy. And when we basically have 28, at Afterburner, we've facilitated tens of thousands of debriefs across nearly 4,000 companies. And the number one reason why people fail to execute is ambiguity around what their destination is. What does good look like when they finish their job? Yeah, you've got a sales target, great, but what does it mean? Is it tailored to you, your sector, your customer, and how does it drive action? And then the great news is, if all of that's wrong and messed up, we debrief and we say, what did we plan? What were the results of the execution? Why was there a gap? And take personal accountability to do one thing to fix it. And when you do that, that's when you bring these, game of inches conversations to life. It's when the 1% per day, every day, when you say those words as an intention, the action you take is debriefing to deliver it. And that's the difference in the fighter pilot community and our culture. We are the only culture on earth that does that once, twice, three times a day until it becomes the way your brain works in everything that you do.
Yeah. That's so good.
And then the third dimension is the moments. So where do I apply that method and mindset? So when it's people leadership, I'm applying it to more subjective kind of conversations. But as a leader, as a people leader, you've got to create an environment where you take personal performance and convert it into measurable performance. And we talk about your job as a leader is to focus on what's right, not who's right. It's an opinion-free environment. When we talk about leading impact, we're talking about, okay, what's your objective? Time, space, and when we've arrived in absolute clarity. And the most important thing is it achievable? Do the people who are doing it agree with you that this particular mission is achievable? And that's part of being a fighter pilot. If a fighter pilot comes in and says, hey, there's 20 bad guys out there and we're going out, the four of us, to shoot them all down, I'm going to raise my hand and go, we can't do that. That's not achievable. Whereas in business, it's like, hey, we've got 4 salespeople going to do 20 million in sales. Everyone's going to go, sure, yep, I'm there.
Yeah, let's
do
go.
it.
Right?
And they're going to fail.
Yeah.
And then the third level of that dimension is, as I said earlier, it's about being someone who's aware, not someone who exists. So an aware person is someone that thinks then acts. They don't react. So they're constantly bringing in the debrief loop to encourage intentional problem solving, to find out through iteration what actually works, because there's no plan on earth that works like just because it's planned. You've got your initial plan and then you've got to iterate it. You've got to tweak it. The real world is going to tell you how good it is or not. And the more we do this over time, the better our planning gets, the better our forecasting gets. And we start to build a tight team, right? And the overarching philosophy for a flawless leader is your job is to manage to achieve lists, not to-do lists. So if your calendar's full, you're constantly busy, you can immediately assess that you're not leading, you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's not a leader's job.
Yeah. So many layers to this. And again, we could talk all day about these elements, and, things like, core values should not be words on a wall. They need to be alive, and they need to be applied. And vision, if, I always say that if everyone who works with you can achieve their vision through your vision, there's no reason for them to ever leave, right? But then you're going to this level of just applying it all across the systems, and so many different levels, dimensions you used. And I'm sure for the listener, they're going to get a ton out of coming back to this later and utilizing some of this. And so before we wrap today, talk a little bit about, first of all, great spending time with you, and your energy is fascinating. The work you've done, but talk about the core of your work, get it done, GID mindset. What does that mean to you? And how did it develop your journey as an entrepreneur and leader? How can they use that to cultivate their teams?
So a get it done mindset it's a bit of a joke because it's something I would mumble under my breath, GID, and my wife will ask me, what are you saying? GID, get it done. So for me, it's like walking in the front door of the house and the shoes aren't tidy. Just tidy the shoes. Walking past a scrap of paper, just get it done. Just it needs to go in a bin, get it done. And when you see anything in life that is not where it needs to be, just do what needs to be done to get it where it needs to be. So the get it done mindset reinforces that whole philosophy of that mindset's actually the actions that you do, not the things that you think. It's about being action orientated to fulfill your potential, because potential cannot be fulfilled just by wanting to be better, wanting something more. If you want to be Warren Buffett, great, good intention, good on you. But the amount of work that guy does, the analysis, how informed he is, how focused, he's successful because of what he does, not what he thinks. So that you definitely need both, because if you don't know where you're going, you don't put the effort in the right direction. But particularly in large enterprise, if you're a CEO of a big enterprise, there was this great study done in 2012. It's called Just Think. It was done by Harvard. And they stuck a whole bunch of people in a white room, white chair, 6 to 15 minutes and you had nothing to think about, right? You just had to sit there. And everyone ranked it as a pretty negative experience. Then they put them at home on their couch and said, surely it's going to be better. No, it was still not a great experience. And then they put them back in the white room and they wired them up so they got an electric shock if they hit a button on the table. And 75% of men and 28% of women hit the button. One guy hit it 190 times. And it just, whilst it wasn't designed to demonstrate that we prefer action, even if it's not the right action, over thought, what it demonstrates was if we don't have anything to think about, a little bit like idle hands at the devil's playground, that we tend to do dumb stuff. And when you look at a large enterprise, it's a whole bunch of people sitting in a white room with no direction, nothing to think about. And they're just hitting an electric buzzer, which is doing the wrong things all the time.
You just explained my college career in your last statement. That's how I had way too much.
What, going in and doing studies and having electric shocks all the time?
way too much free time and doing all the things that ran me aground. Boo.
And don't get me wrong, free time for a leader is critical.
Yeah.
But you need intentional free time, because part of the study was they gave certain people something to think about, and then they gave the other half nothing to think about. And the people that had something to think about it found it far more enjoyable than those that had nothing to think about.
Yeah.
And when you say something to think about, the something to think about is an intention that's been transformed into a measurable destination.
Yeah, good stuff. Great show today. Thank you, Boo, for your work. And I'm sure the audience is curious, you being from Australia, having that accent, of course, but you now live in Park City, Utah. So living there with your family. And appreciate you sharing your story and perspective. We'll include your website and AI agent in the show notes. Okay. But before we sign out, anything else you want the listeners to know about you?
No, I'm just on a mission, really, just to ignite the world's leadership potential, to create a movement of flawless leaders. I want to influence 2 million leaders over the next 5 years as a force of good in the world. Because when your intentions are good, and most people, our intentions are good, but you get compromised in the execution, there's a way of fixing that. That doesn't have to be the norm.
Yeah. Well, well done, well said, and well executed. We'll debrief after this, to use your terms, and it was a real pleasure. Thank you again, Boo. What a tremendous
Thanks, Phil.
what a tremendous experience, Christian Boucousis. Thank you very much for being on Sea Captain Leadership.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast. If you found the conversation valuable, please like, share, and post a review on your favorite podcast app. To learn more about Sea Captain and its high-performance coaching programs, visit us at seacaptaincoaching.com. The link is in the show notes. You can also follow us at Sea Captain Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. Wishing you fair winds and a following sea on your journey.